Let's kick off another week of Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. You got your Mac guys, McMullen and McDonald, here to get you through an important week for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, it's an important week for the other 31 teams in the National Football League, too. It's not just a Birds week, but the Birds are competing this week the same way they do when September rolls around and they kick off. Because today, Johnny Mack is the beginning of, and even if the NFL didn't create it and it was a media creation, it lives on, legal tampering in the National Football League for the next, it's about 50 hours. I think it's 4 o'clock on Wednesday when deals can actually start to become official. But officially, conversations start at noon today. Are the Eagles coming flying out of the box in free agency, Johnny Mack?
Depends on your definition of fly out of the box. I do expect them to target some, they have some space as we compare it to last season. So they're going to have some names in mind and they're going to try to get deals done. But if you're talking about the top of the line guys who are going to get overpaid, remember that pool shrinks every year, it seems, because teams have become savvier when it comes to re-signing their own players, putting a tag on them, understanding the monetary situation. You used to have, if you had a good cap guy, you used to have a big advantage. Now everybody's got a good cap guy. So they all kind of realize the implications. But the guys that do fall through the net for whatever reason, and you've seen how many. I love when this whole process starts, Jody. It's not only us. We got to talk about it every day, but everybody's like, well, I hope we get Mike. Mike Williams not going to hit the market.
Right.
They're not going to hit the market, these top tier players, number one. And then everybody's disappointed when they don't. And all of a sudden, the guys get pushed up the board. Tight end might be the best example of this of all because it's such a value position. 3 guys got franchised. Then you get Zach Ertz getting his deal in Arizona. All of a sudden, if you need a tight end, you're looking at and you're going to have to overpay for Tyler Conklin, who the only reason he played last year was because Irv Smith got hurt. and it isn't really a starting level tight end, but he's got starting level numbers. And that's sort of how free agency goes. So the smarter teams target those potential possibilities with upside. They're young players coming off their first contract. Maybe they didn't live up to the billing, but smart organizations say, hey, if we can get them, we can. And Brandon Brooks would probably be the best example of that locally. He was a good player in Houston. He was a good player. He wasn't a top 5 player at his position in Houston. And the Eagles got him at 25, 26, whatever he was at the time. And all of a sudden, they would have liked it to be a longer run until the injuries took over. But he was a heck of a player for that span when he was here. So that's what you're kind of shooting for. And, we've talked about some of the names. Juju Smith-Schuster, wide receiver, is one that has leaked out there or already in a certain spot. I don't even know if they'll be able to get him because it seems like he's got more interest this year than he had last year. And he's a guy, remember, the Eagles offered him 2 years last year, and he went back to Pittsburgh on a 1-year deal. So they're going to have some targets in mind, and they're going to be aggressive, but they're not going to be overspending. The one name to look at is Marcus Williams because you're going to have to overpay. And if the Eagles overpay for that, by the way, I don't think they should because I don't think he's the type of player that's going to get the money that he's going to get. I think that's going to tell us a lot about sort of their mentality heading into this.
If they get Marcus Williams, you're going to have one happy amigo here because I think he is
expensive.
He's going to be expensive, yeah. So what are we doing? We're picking up other 1-year guys, bargain basement hunting. They're in the top half of cap availability this year. Last year, when they didn't do a whole hell of a lot in free agency, you completely understood it. They decided to do what they did with Carson Wentz. They took the biggest dead money cap hit in the history of the National Football League. some really smart football people, like our buddy Andrew Brandt said, not happening. No team will do that. Self-mutilation. Why would you take on that? And Eagles did just that because they knew they had to, because they knew how bad the situation was with Carson Wentz. And oh, by the way, right now it looks like they're geniuses because they withstood the $33 million cap hit, got a third-round pick last year, which they helped turn into Devontae Smith, and they still have the first-round pick to get from the Colts.
Yeah, and they made the playoffs.
And then they made the playoffs on top of it. Thank you very much for making my point for me. So they didn't have any ability to go out and get any true contributors via free agency. They do this year. They've got some cap flexibility. They've got their starting quarterback on a rookie deal, second-round deal, not even a first-round deal, as a second-round deal right now. If they don't go out and get a well-above-average starter via free agency this year, I will be disappointed in Howie Roseman. And if you're looking at a guy at a position where you have a significant need right now, who do they have under contract as a safety on this team, Johnny McMullen?
Epsy, my favorite.
Epsy? Oh, okay, yeah.
And Kayvon
And we all like Epsy because he's got a cute nickname. But he's a rotational safety. Come on, he is what he is.
He's got the hockey nickname. You gotta love Epsy. But
God bless his nickname, but it doesn't make him an above average.
No, I agree. They need a safety. There's no question. If they don't get one in free agency, and I think they will, then they got to get one in the draft. They probably need two safeties because Kayvon Wallace is one of those guys. The fan base, a lot of the fan base, for whatever reason, it was one of those guys that kind of hung on to him, and they are not happy with his development, to put it mildly. So they're not counting on him to be part of the mix. So they probably need to add multiple safeties. And I still think maybe you see Rodney McLeod back on a cost-effective one-year deal because he loves it here so much. He's so entrenched in the community. That's one that might be able to fit both, both camps, so to speak. So if you get Rodney McLeod back and you're able to sign a veteran, we've talked about Kyle Hamilton in the draft. That's pie in the sky. But they're going to add multiple bodies at that particular position. I just think it's probably going to be a little bit more cost effective than Marcus Williams. Now, or Tyrann Mathieu. I put that name out there as well because people love him. I think it's going to be more of the Justin Reed, who's going to be, plenty expensive, just not that top tier. And if you can't get a guy like that, then you start talking about, the Marcus Mays of the world. And you might have some Jets intel on what they plan to do with him. But, they're going to add a safety. I'm very confident in that.
Fair enough. And I know this is an unfair question. You're a really good football, technical aspect kind of guy. But you can only guess and project when these things get underway by judging how many teams have how much cap room and what the cap actually is and what the previous salaries were. And then sometimes a contract will come out of left field and go, oh, my God, they're giving him that much money. So we don't really know. But do you really think the difference between Marcus Williams and Reed per year, if you go per year, and the structure of the contract is always very important. And I think one of the Eagles' strengths, Howie Roseman and his underlings, are structuring contracts and giving themselves as much cap flexibility as possible. You think Reed's going to be that big a difference between he and Marcus Williams? Reed's okay. Marcus Williams, that's too much.
I do know. I looked at Marcus. I don't have Reed's sort of market value, as they call it. The sites that do this type of thing try to project based on past performance, how much the cap has gone up and things like that. They create this market value, and usually it's pretty good. I mean, they're not usually they're not in left field. And I did look at Williams the other day, and they were talking about 5 years, obviously, which is problematic to begin with, because then you can't put voidable years on top to lessen out the hit. And upwards of 75 million. So we'll see if they're right. And That's too rich. For me, that's a good player. I'm not trying to say he isn't a good player because he's a good player, but that's great player money. And again, I've talked about the expectation, the build of that as well, especially in this particular market, which I think is a little bit worse than certain other markets. And I forget who we were talking to last week. They explained, the Eagles were really, really. It's Jeff Mosher. It's Jeff Mosher from Inside the Birds, and he's right. The Eagles were really after Byron Jones the year Miami just went overboard and paid him like he's the greatest corner in the history of football, and he's not.
No.
And sometimes he's a good player. It's not terrible, but he's not that type of player. And sometimes getting beat out in a situation like that is not the worst thing in the world because it forced the Eagles down other avenues to try to get a corner, and they got a much better corner in Darius Slay on the trade market. And then you start talking about you have to trade assets and you have to sign, you have to do this and that, but they got a better player in a more cost-effective way than what they were shooting for. So I'm just very wary of those guys at the tippy top of the market, and that's Marcus Williams. But again, I brought up Brandon Brooks. It can go in a positive fashion as well. I'm not as high on that particular player as some people. I think he's nestled in as a good, not great player.
Yeah, I think he's closer to great than good. And here's the other reason why I'll be disappointed if the Eagles aren't a player for a guy like him. Positions that the Eagles have need in. We know in the draft, you shouldn't draft for need. You should just take potential, and your draft board is your guide, and you don't want to get too far away from that. I completely understand and agree with the philosophy. Maybe I'm a little bit more flexible than some people, but you do need to stay locked into your draft board. You can't float off it altogether too much just to fill a need. Free agency is all about need. That's what free agency is for, to fill needs on your teams. You can directly target a position and go hard after it. Eagles needs this offseason: pass rusher. Who's the Von Miller? Who do you want to call the best pass rusher?
Chandler Jones.
You think they have any chance on being in on either Von Miller or Chandler Jones?
Well, they shouldn't be on Von Miller, but no, Von obviously wants to stay out on the West Coast. He might go back to Denver, but and he's too old anyway for them to go in that direction. Chandler Jones, I've heard a surprising amount of whispers about, which would stun me, but because he's going to be really expensive.
I was going to say Chandler Jones 30, Von Miller 33, Chandler Jones 32. Is there
a
big one year the big difference? Oh, give me the younger Chandler Jones.
Well, and I brought up, Von's not coming here. That's an Aaron Rodgers situation. That is the bigger part of it. He's not coming to the East Coast. But Chandler would be willing, and I wouldn't agree with that either. I mean, that's okay. That's
Jadeveon Clowney. You want Jadeveon Clowney?
No, he's Mr. I find it ironic that so many people in Philadelphia wanted Jadeveon Clowney for so long, and all they talk about is sack numbers. And the guy's the king of the 1-year deal. He never performs up to expectations because he's still got that #1 overall pick pedigree and everybody. And he is a phenomenal athlete. He's a freak athlete, but he's never. I don't want.
Right, nor do I. But he would be, along with, say, like Randy Gregory, the top 4.
Now that's a guy who, as you know, but I can't count on him. I can't count on Randy Gregory.
Right. You want Randy Gregory or you want Marcus Williams?
I would rather have Marcus Williams because I know he's going to be there.
All right. So other positions of need for the Eagles.
Well, remember, this is a 2-pronged thing too, Jody. So they can afford to be. There's going to be edge rushers in the draft. They know they're going to get an edge rusher in the draft. They know it. They can't get a safety in the draft that they say, well, this guy's got a chance. They might get a nice prospect in the second round. They might even, they might get somebody who turns into a great player down the road, but there's no and there's, I guess certainty is not the right word, because there's never any certainty. We just talked about Jadeveon Clowney never living up to expectations all the way at the top of the draft. But you feel more comfortable about getting an edge rusher in the draft than you do about getting a safety in the draft. So you almost have to you almost have to get a veteran safety. You don't have to get a veteran pass rusher. I think the Eagles will, because I think one of the things you want to use free agency for is to patch up every obvious need, so you don't have to go reaching on draft day. So that's the goal. So I think they'll bring in some type of name as a pass rusher, but there's not as much necessity to do that as there is at safety.
All right. You think you think Eagles will be big plays in the linebacker market? Top of the group linebackers?
Top of the group, no. But I think they always sign one. They always sign somebody off the heap. And
how'd last year's heap and help work out?
Well, did
he last 3/4 of a season? I think he made it through half, Wilson.
He lasted longer than he should have. I'll say that. They shouldn't have signed him. But you can go back to the Corey Nelson. He lasted longer than Corey Nelson. Remember Corey Nelson? No, don't feel bad, because few do. But they played him up like, oh, this is a kid with some upside. He does. LJ Ford's the one guy who sort of played a little bit in Pittsburgh, and for whatever reason never got a chance here. And then he went to Baltimore and became a pretty good player, and that's a pretty good organization. Right. So the Eagles take some hits there. Paul Warlow, remember Paul Warlow? Poor Paul tore his ACL on the first play, Jody. The first play of OTAs. I remember it like yesterday. It was terrible. It was in the bubble. You heard the scream, and it's like, oh, first non-contact. There's no hitting in OTAs.
So Eagles and free agent linebackers are just a bad mix to begin with. So you're then not playing for a linebacker. Cornerback? They're going to play top of the market free agency to have a 1-2.
Well, you could just put top of the market. I don't think they're going to be top of the market anywhere.
Well, then shame on them.
So
if they are coming off a playoff season and they're in good cap position and they are as committed to and I know if they make a trade for Deshaun Watson, it's $35 million coming this year, everything changes. I get that. But they haven't made that deal yet. We don't know if they're going to make that deal. But if they've got a guy on a second-round rookie contract with 2 more years to run on it, and you're telling me they can't play at the top of the market for one position, I got 3 words for the Philadelphia Eagles. Shame on them. If you can't be a top-of-the-market player in free agency when you absorb the $33 million dead cap hit that you did with Carson Wentz, when you've got a quarterback who's making pennies on the dollar, if you can't play at the top of the market at one position, why the hell are the Eagles even competing?
Well, I would say if there is one position, and again, I guess it depends what top of the market is. I mean, to me, it means like the one player. So if you want to say it's Marcus Williams at safety, J.C. Jackson, I believe, has gotten to the market at corner, which stuns me to begin with, and that kind of tells you what he's going to get paid. Linebacker, who was the best linebacker out there? I'd have to look at it.
Kid from Green Bay, probably.
Yeah, I'm not in love with him. Chandler Jones probably be the best edge rusher. Interior, I don't know. Calais is still out there. But I think he's going back to Baltimore anyway. Keem Hicks is aging. I don't. Offensive line, Teron Armstead. They're not in the market for a tackle. Tight end, we talked about. Everybody's gone. Running back is not relevant. Wide receiver, I mean, and then quarterback, obviously. So if they're going to do it, it's going to be a wide receiver or safety. If they're going to do it, and who would you say is the best wide receiver available?
And the best wide receivers all got kept.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Didn't make it.
That's what I mean. So if it
So
comes
that's
down to
why I'm
Allen,
looking at a guy like Marcus Williams, because the Saints were in such cap hell
but
that they couldn't do
doesn't
something to
that
keep
give
him.
you a little pause though, Jody? Because as you mentioned, everybody got kept. Everybody got kept.
Right. So here's what you have to do if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. You have to take into consideration how a guy actually made it to the market. If the trend in the National Football League is all these guys are potential free agents and then getting the deal done, throwing the franchise tag, there are that many more avenues that you can prohibit guys from getting to the free agent market. Well, how does one slip through the cracks? The New Orleans Saints are so over the cap that they couldn't come up with a deal. They couldn't come up with a creative way to keep Marcus Williams. That's why you target a guy like Marcus Williams.
Yeah,
So you
but
don't have to ask yourself
all
the
right.
question, how did he get capped?
And I would say you're right. They have some cap issues compared to other teams, but they
Issues,
did
they're $30 million over with 2 days to get under.
well. A perfect example. I think I don't know. Minnesota was 15 million over. They get under with one deal. One deal. They're going to get under. I mean, they're deep in conversations to get to Deshaun Watson, so they can do some things. I mean, they can do some things if they want to do some things, and that's where there's this. You got to push money off to down years down the road, and there are cap guys and our guy, Brad Spielberger, will tell you that's eventually going to come back to haunt you. And look, I'm not the salary cap expert. Those guys are. But I've yet to see it come back to haunt anybody. I was sitting here preaching with Andrew Brandt last year, as you like to take the victory laps, and that's your victory lap to take. So, but I bought into all the cap people. They were the ones who tell me, no way the Eagles can do that. No way the Eagles can do it. Well, guess what? They did it.
Yep.
They did it. And now they're telling me New Orleans can't do this. New Orleans can't do that. And all of a sudden, New Orleans is a favorite to get Deshaun Watson, and they can't keep Marcus Williams. I don't know. I've been hit. I've been damaged by Carson Wentz.
You're helping me make my argument for me. That's why they couldn't keep Marcus Williams. I'm sure they want to keep Marcus Williams, but which is more important, getting a safety or getting a quarterback? And the Eagles continue to say
much more getting
the quarterback, right? So if they've got moves to make to get under the cap, which they have to do, but then get under it even more to be able to fit a guy in, well, they're saving all that for the quarterback position.
Well, and then you're playing, you're because it's. There's no guarantee you're getting the quarterback. If there was a guarantee, I'd say, yeah, all right, I'll make that trade easily. Who knows? They might even say, I'm sure we're going to get to Tom Brady at some point. You see the shift in Tampa. Oh, Brady's coming back. Let's get everybody done. Let's get the band back together. Well, if the Saints get to Deshaun Watson, Marcus Williams is like, all right, I want to be involved with this. All this stuff can fit together in some kind of mosaic. But look, I'm not going to complain if the Eagles get Marcus Williams. If you're asking me, I don't think they're going to be at the tippy top, and that's why I've centered on Justin Reed, and for other reasons as well. There's been agents whispering that name in the Eagles, and it might be contingency. They might say, hey, let's shoot for the stars. They've done it before. I just brought up Byron Jones. Let's shoot for the stars. Let's go for the best player. If we can't get the best player, then you have a contingency plan. I'm not going to complain if they get the player. I think he's going to get overpaid because of where he is in the market. That's my only point.
And if Reed's a plan B, I'll be okay. Same way you'll be okay with Marcus Williams, depending on how much the contract is. I'd be the same with Reed. But yeah, I'm not ready to move to plan B yet. I still want to implement plan A, which is get the best available free agent at a position of need. The Eagles are in position to do that under the cap. That's what I think they should be doing. All right. Yeah. All Eagles talk for the first 25 minutes. John mentioned there was a kind of big announcement in the National Football League yesterday. Came down while yours truly was on the air on CBS Sports Radio last night. We had a guest planned. I had my producer. We won't be talking about the odds on the upcoming tournament. We're going to stick with Brady's back conversation for the next hour and change. John and I are going to talk about it plenty when we come back. Tom Brady's back, as are Mac and Mac on Birds 365.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view. It goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
We are the Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365 after a weekend getting ready, gearing up for free agency or legalized tampering today to get to free agency on Wednesday. Plenty of Birds topics for us to kick around. Certainly the quarterback position is still part of the conversation. Johnny Mack, I had a chance to talk to a different Johnny Mack, Johnny from down in Houston, John McMullen, on my CBS show on Friday night. And he gave me an interesting point of view on Deshaun Watson, because John's connection to the Texans is as good as any beat writer in the country. He's one of the best in the National Football League, right? They're covering the entire league, but his sources within the organization are as good as there are with anyone else in the league. And he certainly said there is zero chance of mending fences in Houston. He just took that right away. Jody, zero. Not 5%, not 2%, zero. He will never play another game for the Texans. He wants no part of it, he being Deshaun Watson, and the Texans want no part of it. He said, but the Texans are going to get what they need to get in exchange for him. If you think Deshaun Watson is going to rule the roost and hold it over the Texans, that he will be the one who dictates where they go, and he will not be flexible with them. He said, the Texans will make them sit another year. Now, I'd never heard this before, that they were going to play very hard line, hard ball with Deshaun Watson, that they are going to get what they want. If they can, if they can use one team's leverage against another to get a team to come up and get very close to the price that they want, then they'll do what they got to do just to get the deal over and done with. But if, let's say, Deshaun Watson decides he wants to be a Carolina Panther because he's a former Clemson player, and that he, just like he did last year, Miami or bust was his stance, and they actually had some traction on a deal with the Dolphins, but then the owner, the fruitcake Dolphin owner, came out and said, yeah, and get all the 20 of those lawsuits settled immediately. Then we'll get a deal
in
done.
10 minutes. You got 10 minutes.
Yeah, nice job there, buddy. But let's say he decides that Carolina is the place for him, even though Carolina could have been in the bidding last year, and he wanted
They
Miami
were in the bidding. He wouldn't waive it for Carolina.
Right. So if you're not going to Miami because they've closed the door, which, as John McMullen likes to note, not under oath.
They can open the door.
Close the door. You can open the door just as easily. So while Miami's out for this minute, they could get back in very easily. But assuming they are actually out, Deshaun Watson's going to have a number one choice, but that doesn't mean it's his only choice. John really emphasized this with me, that the Panthers were going to play somewhat hardball, and that they're gonna have a minimum price they're gonna need for Deshaun Watson. And if they're not getting it, they're not trading him just because that's the place that he wants to go. They would be willing to suck it up and have him sit for another entire year. Now, maybe this is them just wanting to get the message out, and John McClain is a pretty damn good vehicle for it, that they're going to be as hardline as they are. But Deshaun Watson, the other thing John told me was it killed him to not play this year. That he was around the team. He didn't practice with them, but he was in the facilities, so you had a chance to at least witness him, even though he didn't talk to anybody because under advisement of his attorney, he didn't talk about anything. But from John's sources, it was absolutely killing him not to play. So if he wants to come back and play this year, not just sit and collect his check in Houston again this season, he's going to have some flexibility in his game, which brings the Philadelphia Eagles back into the conversation. Because one of the reasons both you and I, but more so you've been harping on this, and you were right to do, Deshaun Watson wasn't coming to Philadelphia. Last year, prior to the season, when the conversations were being had, he just flat out said no, and he was going to be hardline and take his stance and say, you can't trade me. And he did sit out an entire year because of it. This is a different year and a different story, and the Eagles are a more viable option than they ever have been during the last 12 months.
Yeah, they're a more viable option for a number of other reasons as well. And we talked about the on-the-field stuff, and then Nick Sirianni, was sort of I don't want to say joke, but he wasn't well regarded after the Eagles hired him. And all of a sudden he looks like one of the better young coaches in the league because, hey, guess what? Introductory press conference don't mean zilch, Jody, as you know. And then we talk about the development of Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. So there's more weapons than it looked like at this time last year in Philadelphia, and that would be helpful to a quarterback, obviously. It's interesting because I have heard what John said, that the Texans are going to use what leverage they have to not, have to take pennies on the dollar because Deshaun's only going to play in one spot. But, to me, that's a little bit of bravado for this reason. Because remember, if he doesn't play another year, and John's also right, and Deshaun wants to play. Deshaun knows he's got to get on the field because the longer you're off the field, the more questions are going to be developed. But also, there's diminishing returns from Houston's perspective. If they play hardball and say, "Okay, sit," and he sits for another year, and they blame it on the civil suits or whatever, and he sits for another year, guess what? You can talk about, well, he's still only 27, 28, whatever it'll be at the time. He hasn't played in 2 calendar years. You're not getting 3 first-round picks for a guy with all that baggage who hasn't played for 2 calendar years. It's going to be diminishing returns from their perspective as well. So this thing is going to get done. Houston's going to try to use as much leverage. I mean, everybody in the league also knows they want his guaranteed money off the books. By the 16th, by March 16th, they want it done. So this
let me just interrupt for a second. You think that's happening?
I think there's a good chance it's going to happen.
Yeah, I say no way.
I think it's a good chance you're going to get that bomb on right before the new league year. And you know, what's interesting from the Eagles' perspective, you know, the reports came out yesterday that now, and here's Houston using its leverage. Deshaun's willing to meet with potential suitors. He's willing to meet with Carolina. He's willing to meet with Seattle. I mentioned New Orleans. I don't think he'd have any issue with New Orleans. Cleveland is out of left field now. And, you know, we also talked about how many suitors are going to, that might help the Eagles. More teams popped up because more teams are quarterback.
At least Tampa came out of the mix.
Well, Tampa.
That was one you got to put in the win column for the Eagles getting Deshaun Watson.
But it's only increased the value. So he is willing. So that door was kicked ajar, Jody. That door, he won't play here, was ajar. And yet you haven't heard a peep about the Eagles, which could be Howie doing his clandestine thing and waiting for the big bomb, or it could be that they bought into this. I will say, I remember we talked about this and how fluid it is. Well, what if Aaron Rodgers goes to Denver? Tom Brady retired. What if Russell Wilson's out of conference? Ends up he did go out of conference, at least one. Oh, it could be wide open in the NFC. All of a sudden, boom, it ain't wide open anymore. You're still dealing with Tom Brady. You're still dealing with Aaron Rodgers. You're still dealing with Matthew Stafford. Okay, maybe you got rid of Russell Wilson. I am very surprised that the Eagles are not, you know, storming the beach here. I am very surprised, Jody. I am very, very surprised.
But
and either they're playing it very close to the best. I thought they would have saw that door, and I thought, you talk about going all for it in free agency, I thought they would have kicked the door down to go all in.
Howie can be stealth when he needs to.
He can be, and that's why I leave that out there.
Here's why I would understand it if that's the case, but I'll also throw some cold water on my own line of thinking. They just came off watching the Carson Wentz implosion here in town because the coach decided to pull him with 3 games to go. Deservedly so. Let's get on the record about that again. I would have done it earlier. Carson Wentz was that bad. I would have pulled the plug earlier than Doug did. But Doug pulled the plug, and that imploded the whole Carson Wentz situation. They had to trade him and take the $33 million cap hit. So if it's out there that the Eagles are aggressively pursuing Deshaun Watson and he doesn't end up here in Philadelphia, now you got a quarterback whose head is spinning in Jalen Hurts. They tried so hard to replace me. Now they want to turn around and make me the franchise guy. They don't really trust me. They don't really back me. The Eagles just been there, done that. Don't want to do it again. And they're on record as saying Jalen Hurts is their guy. And then if they go hard after Deshaun Watson, don't get him. Who's going to ever believe anything that Howie Roseman says? So I'll cut him some slack in that if he's doing it under radar, it's probably the smarter way to do it. But here's the one thing that if I was Howie, if it had to come out in the open that they're aggressively pursuing Watson, I'd be okay with it. Jalen Hurts is not Carson Wentz.
Nope.
Carson Wentz, we have found out, is a sensitive little psyche who can't handle anything going not his way. Any little hump he's got to get over, he stumbles and falls. Jalen Hurts is a strong-willed, in-charge leader, take the good with the bad kind of guy. If it goes down that way, you're not going to get the same results of, how dare you bench me? You must trade me, Carson Wentz's scenario. Jalen Hurts will roll with the punches. And he'll come back and he'll do what he'll have to do if he is the quarterback of the Eagles. So I think if this does become public knowledge that the Eagles are going after Deshaun Watson the same way other teams in the league are, I think they'll be okay with it because Hurts is as good as he is.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you with Jalen Hurts. It's not going to be effective. He's not going to be the shrinking violet. He's not going to fall into a bunk if it becomes public that the Eagles want Deshaun Watson and they can't get him, and it ends up they have to go with Jalen Hurts. So that to me is the most key point. I do think the Eagles should have learned something from the Carson Wentz issue. But again, everything is contextual in the fact it comes down to the players. They now know the player they have well enough to know it's not going to affect him. So it doesn't have to go down the same route when it comes to kid gloves and treatment. And by the way, Carson Wentz is not the only quarterback like that. There's more quarterbacks like Carson Wentz than there are like Jalen Hurts, to be honest. They're all, you've seen it now. You've even seen it with Tom Brady, the greatest of all time. You know, he retires for 40 days. I mean, there's so much stinking drama around these guys. We've created this, you know, diva. Everybody talks about divas and wide receivers. There's no more divas in the world than quarterbacks in the NFL. So Jalen Hurts is the rare one, not Carson Wentz.
Right. But here's the difference between Carson and some of the other guys you're referring to.
Well, they can play.
Aaron Rodgers had a hissy fit all last offseason. Didn't come into camp. Don't know if I'll potentially retire. I'll host Jeopardy. And then he came in and won the MVP.
Yeah.
Carson Wentz bitches and moans, gets himself traded out of town, and then goes and blows a playoff spot for the Colts the last couple weeks of the season. There's being a diva and then talking the talk and then walking the walk. Carson talks the talk and falls flat on his face. That's a pretty significant difference, John.
Huge difference. But I'm just saying the environment creates the diva-like mentality. You're right. If you're going to be a diva, it's best to be Aretha Franklin than somebody playing, the Woodline Lodge at 12 o'clock on a Saturday night. So, if you're going to be a diva, be the best diva. But I always go back to a Jerry Seinfeld quote of all people, the legendary comedian. And he was talking about selling deals and making deals. And, and he always said, and he's not the first to say it, but he said, it's show business. It's not show friends. And that's the thing. And you might remember this story. I'll throw this out, Jody. When Larry Brown was here coaching the Sixers, the Larry Hughes draft, who was was darn good basketball player. Larry evidently had promised him and his family that the Sixers were taking him if he was there. And all of a sudden, Paul Pierce drops. And nobody thought Paul Pierce was dropping the Sixers at the time. Nobody. And for whatever reason, Paul Pierce started to drop, and Larry wanted to take him, but he promised Larry Hughes and his family that he was going to take Larry, and he stuck to his promise. It ain't show business. It ain't show friends, Larry. It's show business. And the Eagles can't get caught up in that nonsense. They can't get caught up. They love Jalen Hurts. They love the kid. They love him as a person, as a player. The work ethic, all the intangibles they always talk about. It's show business. It's business. It's business. It's business. I am stunned they are not storming the beach, Jody.
I was doing middays on WIP at the time with my buddy Glenn Mack now. And we talked about the draft all the way up until the draft and came in the next morning after the Sixers did what they did. I had been talking up Larry Hughes. I thought that Larry Hughes was going to be a value pick for the 76ers. I had gotten some information that the Sixers, a.k.a. Larry Brown, were big fans of Larry Hughes. And sure enough, the Sixers take Larry Hughes. So we go on the air. Next day, Mackno says, you got to be ecstatic. They took the kid that you wanted. You said Larry Hughes. They ended up picking Larry Hughes. Great job by you, Jody Mack. How excited are you? I said, well, no, I'm actually kind of disappointed and ticked off. He said, what the hell are you talking about? I said, I had no idea Paul Pierce was coming down the draft board to them. How did they pass on Paul Pierce for Larry Hughes? So, so I remember it like it was only yesterday. I get your point. Your point is right that you can't let my point to Larry Brown should have been back then. I hadn't been partnered with you yet. My different Mac partner. You're not under oath, Larry. You say anything or make any promise you want. And then you need to do what's best for your organization. And that is take the best player, who of course turned out to be Paul Pierce over Larry Hughes. That history is now well written. All right, one other Jalen Hurts point. Did you see this stuff over the weekend with Josiah Anderson?
About his social media?
Yes.
Yes. That was
just stone cold ridiculous. I'd really like to know what she's got against Eagles. because she.
I didn't even know she did it.
Oh yeah, it was her.
Oh,
it was her who said, "Are you noticing that in Jalen Hurts' social media, he's putting down location Houston? Is there something afoot with a trade for Deshaun Watson?"
I didn't know, because a bunch of fans contacted me and said, "Did Jalen Hurts take Eagles off his social media?"
Right.
And I said, I don't pay that close attention to it. But I think because he's got those two, and I got to look it up. I don't think he's ever had Eagles on
Never.
his Twitter
Never.
account.
It's never been part of his social media. Now, when
hashtag untamed, hashtag rare breed, that's been up there for a while, and that was sort of some kind of I forget the marketing campaign he was doing. And yeah, I mean, he's from Houston.
Which Josiah Anderson chose to not acknowledge, and they were adding her questioning.
I assume she didn't know.
Of her own.
I mean, look, I don't know where every NFL player grew up. I happen to cover the Eagles, so I know where Jalen grew up. Sometimes you look it up, sometimes you don't. She probably didn't know.
If
I'm
you're
going to give her
the
benefit of the doubt.
If you're going to make a point of it via social media or on the air or in a column or whatever else, I think you're damn well responsible to look something like that up to find out that he's from Houston, that Houston has been his location on his social media profile forever.
Well, that I agree with. Yeah, you should go, "Oh, what? That's interesting." If that's the road you're going to go down, you have to ask yourself as a jerk, why are you going down that road?
She did, and she just assumed. She drew a conclusion. Ooh, Houston, Deshaun Watson. Is that why he's in Houston now?
Yeah.
Are the Eagles going to trade him in the package to get Deshaun Watson? She pulled two out of left field, and tried to come up with four and fell flat on her face.
Yeah, that's weird too, because she could probably call Nicole Lynn, who's Jalen Hurts' agent, and clear that up in about 10 seconds or text. I don't know. I don't know, Jody. Yeah, it's not good. I got bombarded with the Jalen Hurts movie. I'm like, here we go. Because I hate when players do that. Players have done that.
Kyler Murray just did it.
Yeah.
Took every mention of the Cardinals off his social media. It started a firestorm.
Just get off social media for an hour. Just get off it. I mean, the only reason I'm on it is because we have to be on it as people in the media. And I've said this and watched, Jody. Whenever I hope we do, what show are we on? 231. I'm going to go 231.
This would be show number 230. 231 will be tomorrow.
Very close. I hope we're here doing show 1230. But whenever I walk away from this industry, you will not see me on social media. Period.
Really?
No, it's a cesspool of just awful people, and no, I won't go near it. Once I retire from this particular industry, maybe I'll look at it for news, but I'm not engaging with it. I mean, it's a waste of time. Nobody wants to hear information, actual facts. So number one, when that kind of stuff happens, so-and-so deleted his Cardinals pictures from Instagram. I'm like, what have we created with this? And I talked about divas, just stop it. Stop.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my soapbox, Joe.
I'll never be able to get off Twitter when I stop doing this stuff too. I do enjoy the engage. Sometimes I can tell when someone goes to me if they're just looking to be an idiot and a troll, and I won't engage with them. But every once in a while, you got someone asking a legitimate question they can go back and forth with. So I don't think I'll be giving up Twitter. I'm hoping too that we get to the 1200 stage of shows. This is only 2:30. We got a long way to go to get there, Johnny Mac. We got a long way to go to get to the end of the show today. Our buddy from Tip, and this is funny because I reached out to John yesterday and said, "What do you think? National stuff? How about Rob Maaddi tomorrow?
Day
See if
one,
he'd be
yeah.
willing to hop
Perfect
on.
choice. Perfect choice.
And that was before Tom Brady retired. And Maaddi these days is on the west coast of Florida and does a lot of Buck stuff. He gets his you-know-what back up to Philadelphia because he's an Eagle guy at heart. But those are the two squads he's on mostly, and we'll have Rob Maaddi next hour join us. But when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about Brady and the effects it has on the NFC overall. Certainly, we talked about the quarterback market takes the Bucs out of the Deshaun Watson bidding, but there are other implications and other dominoes that will fall with the Brady return to Tampa. We'll talk about it next year on Birds 365.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you. Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
John McMullen, Jody McDonald, your Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Our buddy Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press going to join us about 25 minutes from now, somewhere thereabouts, and certainly we'll hit Maaddi with some TB12 questions. TB2B back in Tampa Bay, which I'll take some shots across the bow at Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk, who I'm a big fan of. Well, let me go there. You've been a football guy for how many years now? You've been covering the league?
I don't know, 20-something, Jody. I don't like to. It's depressing to try to nail it down.
No, it's not. I'd be proud. I've been doing this sports talk stuff for 30 years. So.
23, 24,
okay.
somewhere.
Yeah, I've been doing it longer than you, so don't think that that in any way diminishes what you do on a daily basis. But are you a fan of Pro Football Talk?
Yeah. Probably not. I'd be more no than yes. Too much aggregation. Too much. I remember how Mike got popular, and one of the things was, you remember the countdown he used to have of how many players were arrested. He used to do the days.
The blotter,
and
police
now,
blotter.
Yeah, the police blotter. And I used to write columns about. Look, I thought, and I said it at the time, NFL players would get a bad rap, and I got the FBI statistics, and compared to the general public in their age group, they were arrested less than but nobody put this context out there, and everybody can get it. I mean, the FBI numbers are public. I thought it was very unfair. Now, obviously NFL players are very high profile, so obviously it becomes news if they do something bad. Understandably so. And there's a lot of context to that, in that, and I'm getting off in a wormhole, in that, they have the ability and means to not, fall into bad things like maybe the average 23-year-old kid on the street. So there's a lot of context to it. But I only bring that up because now he's taking this moral high ground on everything, and he's looking down on people. And I'm like, that's you. I just turned me off. But anyway,
I'm a big Florio fan. I enjoyed the police blotter, and the reason it was fair was because you don't compare NFL players to John Q. Public. You compare NFL players to NBA players, NHL players, MLB players. Those are in the same socioeconomic position that NFL players are. And yeah, there are more.
Well, you see, it isn't there though now, Jody. It's not there. It went away for a reason. He doesn't do it anymore.
Yeah, because somebody in the league twisted his arm. I guarantee you that that's the case. Like, what is it you like to call them? Information brokers? Yeah. Florio likes to have his fair share of information too, to make his site relevant. And someone told him, "Hey, get off the police blotter thing." Would be my guess. I don't know that for a fact, but that would be my guesstimate as to why he did. He's doing much less of that than he's done before. I'm a big fan. I think the site is great. I think his information is great. But every once in a while, Mike, as you just pointed out, gets on a soapbox and hard hammers a point home. And over the last several weeks, Tom Brady to the San Francisco 49ers, if you read Florio, was a fait accompli. That he was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers owe it to Brady to allow. He took a restructured contract to help the team. They can't now hold him to that contract. Well, they sure as hell can, Florio. What the hell are you talking about? He restructured it. He could have said, I mentioned this last night on CBS, the Jason Kelsey contract. Jason was actually under contract, but he had a poison pill in there that the Eagles would have had to pay him $30 million if they just held him to that contract. No, he had to renegotiate it. It was a foregone conclusion. You can put certain things in place so that the team isn't holding you hostage because you've got another year on your contract. He's going to San Francisco. He was so over the top about Brady's coming back and he's going to be a 49er. It was ridiculous. No, Tampa was never letting him walk out the door. If he was going to play football in the NFL in 2022, he was going to do so as a Tampa Bay Buck. And the other, who's that knucklehead former NFL player who's a talk show host in San Diego now?
Oh, yeah.
Bent over backwards to say, Tom wasn't happy with Bruce Arians.
Yeah.
And he and Byron Leftwich would put in all the work during the week, and then Arians would come in with a red marker
that was
and
the
redo
story
the whole
for,
play sheet. What happened to that? If Brady was so on the different page than Bruce Arians, why the hell is he going back to the Buccaneers now?
That was the story for 48 hours. I forget. It was a former offensive lineman. I got to figure out his name is escaping me. And then,
same here. That's why
the Twitter police, went looking. Oh, he used to be a teammate with so-and-so. So he must be. And then that poor guy is getting crap because they think he leaked it to. That was a mess. But. Yeah. Look, I think Mike's on to something. I'll be fair to Mike. I think he was on to something that Tom would have liked to finish up in San Francisco. I think Tom's wanted to be in San Francisco for a long time, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, we just talked about it with Larry Brown and Paul Pierce and Larry Hughes. We talked about it with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. Business. I mean, why? And Bruce Arians said that right away. No, we're not. What would that do for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, letting them play for a team in the conference who, by the way, was that close to the Super Bowl, and is obvious if they had a quarterback, and hey, John Lynch had his chance for all the accolades he gets. He should have went and gotten to Tom Brady, and he was the one doing the hand wringing and saying, well, he's too old. How could you keep playing at 43 at that level? nothing's certain in life, but if San Francisco got Tom Brady when they could have gotten Tom Brady, I'm pretty sure they'd have a Super Bowl, another Super Bowl ring.
And that's fair enough. And again, this is some possibilities, but certainly based on speculation as to what San Francisco did or didn't think. We know what they did. They didn't act upon it. What Tom Brady actually wanted to achieve when he left New England, whether it was San Francisco first and Tampa was a fallback position, nobody knows for sure. And if Florio is getting his information from the Tampa, Brady side, more power to him. If you got a good source, you got to use your good source. But the way that he crafted it, as if the Bucs were just going to allow it to happen, that they were going to kiss Tom Brady goodbye, it'll do more work, Tom. Find out that the Bucs meant what they said when they said, we'll leave a light on for you. Oh, by the way, Bruce Arians says, yeah, well, we would potentially trade him. We'd start the bidding at 5 first-round draft picks for a 44-year-old quarterback. Yeah, that kind of tells me they have no intention of trading him anywhere, and that's why he's back with the Bucs. So even though I'm a big Mike Florio and Pro Football Talk fan, that was a complete swing and a miss on their part. So Brady's back in Tampa. They immediately get Ryan Jensen done as well because Brady reached out and said,
Ali Marpet's not coming back, though. There was a lot of speculation that he would come back, but he's not coming back. So Ali's happy.
Was he 29 years old and he
yeah,
retired,
he's
John?
very young. Yeah. Played 7 seasons. Really good player. Yeah. Just made a lot of money. There's more, I wouldn't say it. It doesn't happen a lot. I remember when Chris Borland did this because he was worried about the concussion issues after a great rookie season for San Francisco, by the way. And he just retired and said, you know what, this isn't worth it. And I'm not going to say there's a ton of those guys, but more and more each year just say, you know what, I've made enough money. I don't want to be crippled later in my life or dealing with degenerative brain diseases and just walk away. And he's walking away. I'm a little bit surprised. I thought when Tom came back, I thought that would be the next domino pretty quickly. And he's, come out twice now and said, nope, he got married. He's happy. He's made about $40 million. You only need a certain amount of money. So Alex Kapp is a free agent. So it's going to be interesting because, they had some issues protecting Tom in the playoffs, mainly because Tristan Wirfs got hurt against the Eagles. That was a devastating. And so did Ryan Jensen.
And Jensen got hurt.
Yeah.
They're missing their 2 best offensive linemen. Yeah. Most teams, the Bucs aren't the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's one of the things we don't give enough time to and talk about here on our show or anywhere else for that matter. The Eagles had offensive line injuries all last year, and they survived it because they got great offensive line depth. Tampa doesn't have that, and Mitchell Marpet next year will be something that they're going to have to adjust.
And Alex Kapp is a free agent, so that's a guy who's going to get paid because there's, Cincinnati. Some people have speculated because they're desperate for offensive linemen. They got some work to do, but pretty confident that they're going to be in the mix next year. I've given up on predicting Father Time catching up to Tom Brady. So I forget who it was late last season who said he wasn't going to retire. But I remember the quote. The quote was, why would he retire? He's got all the answers to the test. And he did retire, but not really.
No.
And he's got all the answers to the test. So, they've made it easier. Quarterbacks aren't as much danger as they once were. In a different era, maybe you can't play to this level, but they can now because they protect them so much. And you got all the answers to the test. As long as the wife lets you out of the house, why not?
And I had a Brady hater on CBS Sports Radio last night on my phone line. The NFL will put him in a pink shirt so he can't be touched. And nobody
can be touched. It's not just Tom Brady.
Exactly.
Nobody can be touched.
That's what I said. Oh, and Brady and Belichick, I'll go ahead and predict it right now. That's going to be next year's Super Bowl. I said, well, then why didn't they do that this year? If the NFL is rigging everything and dictates everything and controls the referees and the replay officials, why didn't Brady
Jody,
and Belichick
obviously
the
they wanted the Rams and Bengals in the Super Bowl for their passionate fan bases. And I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you fix it to get the Rams and the Bengals in there?
Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's absurd.
Yeah, but those are the, when you open up the phones, that's some of the stuff that you have to deal with, and I did have to deal with it last night. All right, want to jump back to Eagles and the defensive side of the ball. Two key guys, big-time star players in the National Football League. One on the Eagles, one should have been on the Eagles. On the Eagles, of course, is Fletcher Cox. A couple more reports around information guides around the NFL that there is interest in Fletcher Cox around the National Football League. There are some teams that have cap flexibility that might not want to overpay for a Vaughn Miller or whatever else because they're okay at the defensive end position, but teams that have big-time needs at the defensive tackle position that may be willing to trade for a guy like Fletcher Cox. We know the Eagles explored it leading up to the trade deadline. Trade they wanted wasn't there. Fletcher's relationship and play under his new defensive coordinator certainly improved over the second half of the season after a slow start. Well, we've got a year under our belts. Jonathan Gannon is back as the defensive coordinator. Fletcher Cox is a year further into his contract, which means the dead cap money hit would be that much less this year than it would have been in season last year. How real is the possibility that the Eagles could trade Fletcher Cox this offseason, John?
Pretty real. When this came out, I think it was Ian Rappaport. We talked about information brokers earlier in the show. This stuff comes out for a reason. It's just that. So, Ian's getting the money, getting the information from Fletcher's agent or the Eagles. Somebody wants this information out there, this floating, as I called it, to use a political term, a trial balloon to see what happens. So, it's pretty clear. The Eagles were very close to trading Fletcher Cox at the trade deadline last year. Pittsburgh, Las Vegas were in on it. It nearly got done. And we know he wasn't happy with the defensive scheme early last season. Then when it became clear, you got to make the best of it for the rest of the season, the Eagles took off. Fletcher started playing a little bit better. And, everything's copacetic. It's interesting because there's a little bit of a mystery. And I'm still trying to figure out, because on paper, it looks like you can't trade Fletcher Cox until after June 1st. Pre-June 1st, you'd be taking on $41 million in dead money, which is more than Carson Wentz last year. But the more problematic part was $26 million. You lose in cap space. Now, post June 1st, that goes all the way down to $12.9 million of dead money, which is fine. And you gain $2 million, a little over $2 million in cap space. So from that standpoint, obviously the Eagles would be soft pedaling this. They would wait till after June 1st. And obviously, if you're going to trade the guy after June 1st, you're talking about draft picks in 2023, not 2022. Plus, you also have to remember June 1st, most teams have already made their plans. They populated their offseason rosters. You don't have as much leverage at that point. You got to wait to the trade deadline and everything rolls over. However, there's some, evidently, according to a bunch of cap guys, our own Brad Spielberger, we have on this show, Jason Fitzgerald of Over the Cap, have said there's this weird option that's so complicated they can't explain it on Twitter, which goes again to Howie Roseman's ability to manipulate the cap, and also Jake Rosenberg, who people don't know, but is sort of Howie's right-hand man when it comes to contracts. That would make it easier to trade Fletcher Cox before June 1st. But I have heard no explanation. From the numbers that are publicized, they would almost have to trade him after June 1st. But these guys keep saying there's this little thing in there, and it's a small path that evidently they could ignite this option, and it would be easier to trade Fletcher Cox. And I wish I could explain it to you, but they haven't explained it to me, so I can't.
Get who's your buddy? Howie's right hand man,
Brad Spielberger.
No.
Jake Rosenberg.
Jake, get him on the phone.
Jake's not,
come on, you and Jake are tight. You're like this.
Yeah, Jake's not giving up any of the family secrets.
He's not returning your text these days, Jake Rosenberg. Oh, that's give it a shot. So I wanted to ask you about Fletcher, and then there was one other move that was made over the weekend that I wanted to get your take on. Khalil Mack was traded by the Bears to the Chargers. I got to be honest with you, John. I don't understand this a little bit. Bears made the big play to get Mack, paid a ton in draft capital a couple of years ago, came in, changed that Chicago defense. The Bears went to the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback 2 years running, which means they made it to the playoffs because of their defense, which means they went to the playoffs because of Khalil Mack.
He was unbelievable when he first got to Chicago. Yeah.
And he had an injured year this year. He missed, I think, 10 games. I think he played in 7 out of 10. He still got 6 sacks. Who led the Eagles in sacks, by the way, this year? Was Josh Sweat?
Javon Hargrave and Josh Sweat tied, I believe, with 7.5.
7.5. So Khalil Mack missed 10 games, 10 out of 17, and he would have only been a sack and a half off the Philadelphia Eagle lead. So when a guy does what he did this week, oh man, that was weird. I got my TV here. I got it on mute, and for some reason the volume just kicked back in. Listening to Peter Schrager there. I'm sorry about that, folks, but I didn't touch anything. I don't know how that happened. Maybe it was because of Khalil Mack. My TV is trying to tell me you're right, Jody. The Eagles should have been in on the bidding for Khalil Mack. Johnny Mack keeps telling me they're not playing at the top of the market, and certainly Khalil Mack is there because he's scheduled to make $63 million over the next 3 years, $20 million plus player. I would have loved to see Khalil Mack in Eagle Green. Second round draft pick is certainly the Eagles something they could afford. They've got 3 ones. You trade down a little bit, you cover that second round pick quite easily with maneuvers this year. Do you think they missed out by not getting a guy like Khalil Mack?
Well, he is a difference maker if he's healthy, to say the least. I mean, he is a monster. You talk about that year he had in Chicago, where he's I mean, he was making a play every game. He was, it was a sack, it was a strip sack, it was a forced fumble. I think he led the NFL in forced fumbles. They had so many turnovers that year as a defense. He was the engine to it all. He was just a great, great player. Certainly, if he was not the best edge rusher, certainly in the conversation. Things move fluidly. That was his first year in Chicago, so I'd have to look it up, but it's 2018 or 2019, somewhere in that range. Still has been dominant every year until last year, as he mentioned, where he was out for a bit. And then you start talking about 31-year-old guy, makes a ton of money. From Chicago standpoint, we're not in a position. We're not in a position to compete right now, and they probably aren't in a division with Aaron Rodgers, who's going to torture that division for a few more years probably. You know, do we want to pay this guy when we're going to be? It's this whole modern mindset, Jody. You know, more and more GMs think this way, in that we're not ready to compete. So why are we paying this guy this much money? And then they dump him and they get the draft capital and they say, when we're all ready to compete, we'll have younger players. And even if we are, Khalil Mack will be a descending player by the time we're ready to compete. I don't necessarily agree with it. I say it all the time. But they have Justin Fields. Concentrate on developing Justin Fields. We all have this. The Eagles are having this conversation, right? Cost-effective quarterback on his first contract. And then when he gets to his second contract, you got to pay him a boatload of money. Well, why aren't you trying to maximize building around Justin Fields? I don't know. This is this chicken and the egg. Maybe they have no confidence in their ability to develop Justin Fields. I don't know. I don't understand this mindset, though. I can tell you that, Jody.
But they bring in a defensive-minded head coach, and their big offseason move is to remove Khalil Mack from the lineup. If they got, and I know quarterbacks are completely different. You look at football players as football players. You really can't. You need to look at the quarterbacks as quarterbacks, and then everyone else as football players. So I know there's a whole different set of rules, but Russell Wilson gets you what Russell Wilson gets you. Russell Wilson in the rankings of quarterbacks is probably not even close to where Khalil Mack is in the rankings. And I'll go defensive players, not even linebackers. I'll go front seven players. He's that good that he ranks ahead of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson gets you 2 1s, 2 2s, Noah Fant, and Khalil Mack gets you a second-round draft pick.
Yeah.
There's
you'll see, if the Eagles do trade Fletcher Cox, it'll be like, second-round pick. They got offered a second-round pick and a third-round pick last year, but something of that nature. Yeah, I mean, quarterbacks are different, so you set them aside. But it's interesting because the Chargers, who acquired Khalil Mack, they're in that situation right now. Justin Herbert's farther along than Justin Fields. They seem ready to poise, and they go out and they're built. So they're doing what people say you should do. All right, they have the cost-effective quarterback for at least a short amount of time. Let's go get everything around them and try to make a run. Chicago's doing the exact opposite. I don't know. And it's become groupthink. It's become, it used to be outliers. Now you have in, Cleveland with Andrew Berry's a big part of it. The Eagles are a big part of it, to be honest, because they spawned off so many of these guys. This constant manipulation of we're not ready, very NBA-like mentality. I don't agree with it in the NFL. I think Cincinnati proved it. I don't know why people don't look at Cincinnati and say, what? I mean, why you're telling me you're in the playoffs and you're telling me you're not ready to compete? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from Eagles fans this year. Well, we can't go get Russell Wilson anyway or Deshaun Watson because we're not ready. What? I don't get it, Jody.
As my buddy Ike Reeves pointed out the other day in WIP, I was in the car listening to him, and he said it, and I said, no, Ike, I've been saying it. I'm glad a guy like you agrees with me. Who thought the Eagles were ready in 2017? Coming off 2016, Doug Peterson's first year, Carson Wentz's rookie season, below 500. Who during the offseason said, well, let's make a push for the Super Bowl this year because we're ready? Nobody. Zippity doodah. The one parade in the history of this town, or at least the last 60 years, 1960. Once. It's happened once. One parade. And it was a year the Eagles weren't, quote unquote, ready to compete. So please.
Well, you'll have the one guy out there because there's, the one guy out there predicts them to go 16-0 every year. Now 17-0. So there's the one guy who predicted, they're going to win it all.
Yeah, right.
But not many. Not many.
He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We are the Mac Birds 365 guys. We're going to add a third piece to the show. Coming up next, Rob Maaddi, Associated Press, scheduled to join us here on Birds 365. Stick around.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
McMullen and McDonald here with Young Birds 365. Let's make this a threesome. Joining Birds 365 from the Gold Coast of Florida, formerly of South Philadelphia, Associated Press national football writer, Mr. Rob Maaddi. Maaddi, man, where were you last night at 7:15?
Probably writing about Tom Brady, and at 8:15, and at 9:15, and at 6:15.
Well, we knew it was coming, Rob. That's
Yeah.
why we said, let's get Rob Maaddi tomorrow. We knew it was coming. No, we had no idea.
Had no idea. Sometimes better to be lucky than good.
The hints were dropping, though. The hints were dropping. It seemed like he wasn't. You know, I knew all along that he wanted to play, and I think it was just a matter of Tom having to convince Giselle to give him her blessing and not file divorce papers or whatever the ramifications would have been. And maybe it took 40 days for him to do that, but it happened. He's back. He's still at the top of his game, which is incredible at 44, going on 45 years old.
Yeah, it really is. And you mentioned the fact that I think we've seen it here in Philadelphia locally with Jason Kelce. A lot of times people have to take a step back after season. They don't realize the grind it takes. But when you're at the level of Tom Brady, everybody wants to know right now, 10 minutes after, you lose to the Los Angeles Rams. But as far as the whispers, Rob, about Tom potentially going somewhere else, and, people said San Francisco, and obviously he's from there. He loves the area, always wanted to be there, at least early in his career. Was there anything to any of that Tom was trying to finagle his way out of Tampa Bay to play somewhere else?
I have no definitive information that says that he was trying to do that. But I will tell you, I spoke to some people who are starting to get that feeling, and then boom, he's out and watching Manchester United with the Glazer family, and the next day he's returning to the Buccaneers. You will not hear now, in hindsight, anyone's going to be able to report that that was the case, because it won't look good for the Buccaneers or Tom Brady. So if that really was Tom's thinking, that maybe I'll wait until the Buccaneers bring in someone who is expensive enough that they can't reverse the decision, whether it's Russell Wilson was traded, so it's not going to be him. If they bring in Deshaun Watson, perhaps, well, then obviously it would signal they can't reunite with Brady. So I was starting to get a sense that I knew at some point he was going to play. And I just didn't think that was as far-fetched as a lot of people want to make it seem. Because when I was at the Super Bowl, it was picking up a little bit of steam out there. I just kind of casually mentioned it to Deebo Samuel. He's like, whoa, if we play with the GOAT, I'd love to play with the GOAT. I'm like, I know you got Jimmy G. I know you have Trey Lance. He's like, it's Tom Brady. But at this point, it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be one of those uncovered secrets that's going to come out, because it's best kept behind closed doors. Now, if he plays out, I think there's going to be a restructure. There's got to be something done with him contractually to help benefit the Buccaneers in this free agency period. And that may be adding on some voidable years or adding on another year. So depending on how his contract situation is figured out, is resolved, there still could be that sentiment, that thought that he may want to finish out his career. But then you look at it from, do you want to go at his age, learn a whole new playbook somewhere else and try and win one more time? I think it's a difficult thing to do, but he's a guy who does otherworldly things all the time. So right now he's a Buccaneer. So we'll go with that.
He had such a tough time adapting to that Tampa Bay playbook. Oh, how'd that work out? Yeah, they won a Super Bowl. So I don't doubt for a millisecond that he could do it. But here's the one thing I had that I continue to come back to about this whole, he wants to go out to San Francisco, finish off his career. Tampa wasn't letting him go. He was under contract. They did a renegotiation last year, too, which I made this point with John earlier in the show. If Brady wanted the ability to go free agent, you do what Jason Kelsey did. You put a $30 million poison pill in so that Tampa can't, that they have to blow up the contract and they have to let you become a free agent. You didn't do that. So you knew he was under contract to them for another year, and they didn't want to go. Arians, Light, everybody involved was, well, we're leaving the light on for Tom. Tom's still our guy. We're hoping that Tom changes his mind and comes back. They were never moving on from Brady, so he wasn't getting to San Francisco.
Yeah, the only way, Joe, the only way that could have happened is if they replaced them with Deshaun Watson or somebody so expensive, and then mid-July he says, I'm coming back. Then what are they going to do? You're not going to keep Brady and Deshaun Watson. But that didn't happen. That didn't play out. But that was the thinking, and that could be the only way. I didn't think they were going to move on from him and hand it over to Blaine Gabbert and Kyle Trask. It's just, as Bruce Arians said, bad business. It wouldn't have been smart business for them.
Yeah. And speaking of smart business, are you surprised at all, Rob, that things went to Deshaun Watson's way on Friday in South Texas? No criminal charges, so that's off the table. Still got to deal with all those civil allegations, but yeah, that's not going to impact his ability to play in the NFL. NFL suspension still looming. Teams are lining up. I mean, over a dozen. Does that surprise you? Because I know Joe Banner had written that earlier in the week, last week, Rob, that he pegged the Eagles as the favorite to get Deshaun Watson. One of the reasons he cited was his choices will now be limited. They're not limited. If anything, they're increasing and increasing and increasing. Is that a bit of a surprise to you?
Well, John, we know teams need elite quarterbacks, right? That's how you win in the NFL. You need an elite quarterback. So once the criminal proceedings are not going to move forward, that opens him up to a lot more teams. Now, I know there's a lot of interest from various teams, and they're all doing their due diligence, and that's what you need to do. But are the reports of so many teams interested in him necessarily accurate? We also got to take a step back and think, where are those reports coming from? Well, they're not coming from the team. Like, if I'm interested in Deshaun Watson, I'm not leaking it to my favorite NFL reporter. Hey, we're interested in Deshaun Watson, because you don't want the price to go up. You don't want it's a competitive disadvantage. So any of that stuff comes from the agents and the team itself. And Houston, of course, is going to want people to think, yeah, 18 teams are interested in anybody who doesn't have Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert is going to be interested in. So there's a lot of that's put out there. Now, the realistic options for him, I think Carolina is one. Now, we know Pittsburgh has come out and said very strongly that they're not going to be interested in him. So Carolina, New Orleans, I thought Tampa was going to be a favorite until Brady came back. And the Eagles, of course, who there was a report this weekend, right, that said the Eagles aren't interested. Well, of course, the Eagles are going to tell whoever's going to be willing to listen that they're not interested, because it's going to create an awkward situation if they can't land Deshaun Watson and they actively pursued him, and now they have to welcome Jalen Hurts back with open arms. So, there's a lot of that, and you've been around long enough. You know all this already. There's a lot of that stuff out there that's misinformation, media manipulation. I do think there are many teams that are going to be trying to do their homework and see what they can do as far as trading for Deshaun Watson, and sitting down with him would make the most sense. Before you make a trade of that magnitude, bringing him in, sitting him down, talking to him eye to eye, face to face. Hey, what's all this about? You're not going to be in criminal court, but you still got these civil cases. This isn't 1, 2, or 3. This is 20 plus women. What happened? And they need to hear it. If I'm an owner, I need to hear it straight from Deshaun Watson's mouth.
Well, he's going to, as a matter of fact, be deposed in some of those civil cases this week, so we will get more information on that. Do want to ask about one team you didn't add to the mix on the Deshaun Watson pursuit trail, Seattle. They just traded Russell Wilson. I kept fighting off people who told me all year that, if they trade Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll's going to walk away because he's going to want no part of a rebuild. 71 years old. You watch the combine. Pete Carroll is one of the most energetic coaches in the National Football League. I don't care how old he is. He acts like he's 30. If he's 71, so what? Who cares? I said he's going to be back coaching the team no matter who the quarterback is. But I'm sure it would be preferential if they could get another franchise quarterback immediately after they traded one. They've got the capital that they got from Denver to get involved. Think Deshaun Watson would play well in Seattle?
I think 100% they're interested for sure. And like you said, they got the draft assets. They're better equipped than most teams, and maybe even so than all teams to go after him. It's going to come down to that no trade clause, and is he willing to waive it to go there? If he has a conversation with Russell Wilson about Seattle and the makeup and what's happening there and the rebuild, he may not want to. I think with Deshaun Watson is his decision's going to come down to he holds a lot of he holds the no trade value and the no trade clause, and because of that, he's going to want to make it. He's going to want to pick the best environment for him. Now, we know last year he was willing to waive it to go to Miami. They didn't make that deal. He's got to look around Carolina, the New Orleans, Seattle. New Orleans is in a little bit of transition too without Sean Payton. Carolina's been pretty bad. They got a nice defense. They got maybe a piece. What are they going to do with Christian McCaffrey? I think Seattle's going to be in the mix. There's teams are going to have to move him a little bit. They're going to have to convince him as much as he's going to have to convince them to make that for the PR hit that they're going to take from a significant amount of their fan base. I did see a poll when it was one of the Buccaneers beat writers put it up, and it was overwhelming support in Tampa. I think different fan bases are going to view this differently. I haven't seen any in Philly. You guys would know better than me, but I think that would be overwhelmingly negative in Philly if it were to be bringing in Deshaun Watson. Seattle, I think, would be closer maybe to a 60-40 situation. So that's certainly an option. He's got at least one piece in DK Metcalf. He's got Tyler Lockett. The interesting name, guys, is Colin Kaepernick throwing his name right out there in the mix. tells Tyler Lockett, I'm going to be there tomorrow. So I'm like, all right, Tyler Lockett's on the Seahawks. They looked into Colin Kaepernick before. I'm going to be there tomorrow. Let's get together and we'll throw. So I just reached out to one of Colin's representatives. I'm like, is this anything official? The Seahawks bringing him in, and they said nothing official. He's just doing this on his own.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Colin's been out of the game so long. You talk about Deshaun Watson. I mean, one of the reasons, the Houston's trying to play this leverage game, that we have some leverage in the fact that we can make him sit another year. And the last thing Deshaun Watson wants to do is sit 2 years, and he's at the apex of his career, 27, 28 years old at that point. All of a sudden it would become diminishing returns. But I do want to steer you back here to Philly, Rob, and Deshaun Watson to kind of wrap that up. Are you surprised at all, considering the way Jeffrey Lurie has always thought about the modern NFL and what you need to be consistently successful? And that's a high-octane passing game, a very effective passing game. And you couple that with Deshaun Watson willing to meet now with certain suitors, Carolina, Seattle, among them. Are you surprised the Eagles aren't kicking down the door? And maybe they are behind the scenes, as you mentioned. Is it a little bit of a surprise to you that this team is hemming and hawing a little bit?
No, because John, I don't think they're not kicking down the door. I think that they're trying. I think they're trying. They're going to try and do this as quietly as possible. I think there's certainly interest in Deshaun Watson from their end. I personally wouldn't do it. I would keep Jalen Hurts and try him out for another year and trade one of those 3 picks and try and get more picks next year and maybe use 2 of them on defense and try and get somebody, or some defensive help, some players in free agency. But I do think the Eagles are going to, as secretly and as quietly as possible, continue to pursue Deshaun Watson to the point where they won't be out of the running until another team secures his services and makes that deal. I don't feel there's an urgency for the Eagles because they have a better quarterback situation than the other teams who are in the mix. They have a guy who led them to the playoffs last year. He was inconsistent. The season didn't end well in the playoffs, but I think there's some hope that maybe with enough more seasoning, more development, more players around him, they still don't have a final answer in their mind on Jalen Hurts. And I know that many in the fan base have come to the conclusion he can't lead them to the promised land, but I think that is still a question that they have. So they don't have that necessary urgency to be able to go out there. And plus the awkwardness of publicly pursuing Deshaun Watson is something why this will stay backdoor as much as you can in this day and age.
All right, Maaddi, man, I want to ask you about legalized tampering, which starts in a couple hours, as a matter of fact, or less than 2 hours, as a matter of fact now. The teams with the most cap space in the NFL, all you got to do is make one move, and then you can change it drastically. Like the Cowboys now actually have more cap space than the Eagles because they traded Amari Cooper yesterday. So one move can drastically shift who's got cap space and who doesn't. But the Eagles are in the top half of the NFL. They've got flexibility, certainly more flexibility than they did last year when they had the $33 million Carson Wentz dead cap hit on their cap. Will they be a player at any position at the top of the market? And when I say top of the market, I mean highest paid, second highest paid, third highest paid in just this free agency market. Will the Eagles be a player on that level, or are they going to be shopping at the bargain basement bin to fill as many holes as they have on this team right now?
I think the Eagles' DNA is that if they are going to be in the top 1, 2 at any position, it'll be defensive line. They don't really need to pursue offensive linemen. They're good there. They have depth there. I think it'd be an edge rusher, and whether that's Chandler Jones or somebody else, I think that's the only way you see the Eagles spending a whole lot of money and making a big splash. You saw a couple of years ago they were willing to put down a ton of money for Javon Hargrave, and last year, he really proved it. So I think that's the position. If they're going to go and bring in a guy, another weapon, we've heard the Juju Smith-Schuster is a guy, a wide receiver. He's not going to command top of the market dollars. And it makes sense for this team where they are with the flexibility they have, the draft picks that they have, not to be overspending in free agency and to try and play it as wisely and as smartly as possible. And if that means bargain basement, middle of the road guys, if it means making some trades, if it's moving around some of those draft picks for guys who can help you now, but getting some picks later, to me, they're not going to be a splash team unless it's making that move for Deshaun Watson. I don't think we're going to see the Eagles making a huge, big splash, although Chandler Jones would certainly be a guy, I think, who fits that description of, hey, big move impacts the salary cap too. A big move like that would impact the salary cap, but there's always ways, and they're good at it, to where they can bring somebody in, a high-ticket item, and finagle the cap well enough to give them some more flexibility.
Is it sort of a bit of a contradiction, Rob, when the Eagles say, and we know part of it is lip service and part of it is what you have to do, because you have to guard against, if you are trying to make that splash with Deshaun Watson, you have to be realistic and say we can't lose this kid. We can't lose Jalen Hurts as well. And you say things like, we want to build up around Jalen Hurts. But then you still have that mentality, what you just spoke of, well, you want to be cost effective. You want to do this. Well, if you have that young quarterback under very short time where you can build other parts of your roster with higher paying players, isn't that what the Eagles are talking about? And is that contradiction something that's just the business of doing football, or is there more to it?
But when you look at this free agency market, are there those guys that you think, though, that you can spend that kind of money on as far as on the offensive side to help Jalen Hurts? Now, there is potentially in Christian McCaffrey, a running back who could become available. Would that be somebody that it's not a free agent move, it's a trade, it's somebody – I would be very leery and very wary of making a move for a guy who's as oft injured as Christian McCaffrey. But I understand what you're saying, because this is a time to take advantage of having a quarterback who has a second-round pick contract like Jalen Hurts, and that's when you can bring in other pieces. But Odell Beckham Jr. is coming off an ACL. You're not going to go overspend for somebody like that. And Chris Godwin got franchise tagged. So I think if there was the right guy who they feel is going to be able to take this from a 9-win team and impact them to 11 or 10 or 11, I think they'd be willing to do it. I think they've always shown a willingness to spend in certain areas, right? They'll certainly do it on the O-line. They'll certainly do it on the D-line. I still don't think they'll do it at linebacker. I don't know what they're going to do there. They may go get a couple veteran pieces. Hey, Jordan Hicks is available. How did it end with Jordan Hicks? Is there a way that relationship can be resolved and you can bring him back? If he doesn't have many other options, he still wants to play football. He's a good dude. I know he can certainly play the game a little bit, but I don't see splash move at linebacker. But it's something that they have to look at. Hey, we got a guy in Jalen who is not killing our cap like some of these other teams have with quarterbacks who are taking up such a high percentage of their cap. We can try and supplement in other areas and not kill ourselves.
All right, Maaddi, man, since we're talking about so many ex-Cardinals, bring back Hicks, Chandler Jones, I'm going to go there as well with a guy who I just love as a player, but I'm not sure he's a fit. He's you can put him at a spot that the Eagles are willing to spend for, but is that his true position? Hassan Reddick is basically a outside linebacker / defensive end. He's a little smallish for defensive end. But he's played defensive end and played it pretty damn well. He actually was better against the run this past year, grading out, than he was at getting to the quarterback. He's a free agent. He's only 27. Chandler Jones, 32. Von Miller, 33. So it comes down for me to the defensive coordinator saying, oh, I can make the defense work with this guy. I can see how I'll be able to use him and place him and get the most out of him. Is Son Reddick coming back to Philadelphia a chance, or is just a non-starter because it's a non-fit? No, did Maaddi freeze up on us?
Temple kid, I think when you got talent. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, we got you. We got you.
You got me. Hey, anytime you can bring back a Temple kid and you can look at a guy who he led his team in sacks last year, you can try and make talent. And this is what we were told last year. This isn't right. We're not here we don't have a scheme and a system. We fit our scheme and our system to the talents and skills of our players. Well, now you're 1 year into the scheme and the system. And as you said, the fit may not necessarily be great. I think if you have the opportunity to bring in somebody at 27 years old as opposed to 32 or 33, and you can do it and you can have him here for the longer term, you try and make that fit. You try and make it work. But I don't see Carolina, unless if they're going to get Deshaun Watson, they're going to have to figure out their cap issues. That's a guy they want to target and bring back. In my mind, and it might be difficult to try and pry him away. So it depends on what's going on with the Panthers. But they got to look at him. They got to look at him. They need some help getting to the quarterback. That's how you win with it. We all know this. You win by having that elite quarterback and being able to bring down that elite quarterback.
All right, Rob, last one from me. I can't let you go. And first, I want to say, everybody read Rob. Obviously, the great Rob Maaddi, AP NFL writer, host of the AP Pro Football Podcast, his Faith on the Field show. You can check that out at faithonthefieldshow.com. You talked about franchise quarterbacks. Nobody was closer to Carson Wentz in town here than you. I know you've had to use the mute button on occasion with some of this vitriol against Carson Wentz. I thought one thing you said kind of resonated with me, and I've written about this before, is Carson's kind of naturally an introverted person, and he plays a position in the NFL where you have to be a leader by nature, and a lot of that is an extrovert's nature. And Jalen Hurts is the perfect example of this. He tries to engage the entire team. He tries to go out of his way to get everybody involved. Anybody who's been around an NFL team knows the quarterback doesn't spend a lot of time around the defense other than on the field. So if you're in the locker room, you're in the cafeteria, you got to make an effort. Carson was just introverted. He went about his business. And I think some people took that the wrong way. Overall, though, he's a good guy. He's a good human being, and people have made him out to be this villain because he didn't have success on the field, which I think translates more to the injuries than anything else. Washington Commanders, Rob. Good move, bad move. Does Carson Wentz have anything left?
I think it's a good move for Washington, for the organization culturally, from the standpoint of the issues that they have with Dan Snyder, all of the investigations and everything else. You're bringing in someone in Carson Wentz who could stabilize a culture of community within that locker room. Now, that said, on the field, I don't know how much he's going to make a difference. I don't think Carson Wentz, for about a 9, 10, 11 game period, was a very good quarterback this year. For about 3, 4, 5 games, he wasn't very good. He was pretty poor. All said and done, 27-7. You can look at numbers and make them tell you whatever you want them to tell you. And It's not a horrible season. He's not a garbage quarterback, not a Pro Bowler either. He's not a Hall of Fame quarterback. His leadership skills are certainly questionable for all those reasons you stated, John. He's shy, he's quiet, he's introverted, he's awkward, he's uncomfortable in the spotlight. He doesn't do a great job of relating to everyone on the football team. One of the things that I realized about Tom Brady being down here in Tampa is his leadership ability. Like, guys just love him, whether he's talking to a 22-year-old who's young enough to now be his son and he plays special teams, to if it's another veteran guy. And I don't know that Carson's personality allows him to be the leader he needs to be. And I think sometimes, I've said this before, his shyness, his quietness, his introvertedness gets translated as arrogance or aloofness, when he's not arrogant, he's not aloof, but it just comes across the wrong way. And other things about him and his personality and his lifestyle sometimes doesn't fit people, and he's not their cup of tea. He's not going to go out and chug beers with linemen. He's not going to go out and do shots with receivers or anyone. He's not going to be dropping F-bombs in a video, pregame hype video. That's not what he does. It's not him. And for some, they'll look at that and go, well, how can you be a leader and you know, you're not relating, you're not hanging out, and none of that's bad. Now, I'm not trying to criticize anybody who does that, but people lead in different ways. I mean, Phillip Rivers didn't drop the F-bomb. He said dadgummit 1,000 times. One of the funniest. I don't know how with a straight face, man. Phillip Rivers was funny. Nobody could talk trash better than that guy without using a curse word. It's impressive to me, but I just think there's aspects of Carson's personality, values, and system and beliefs that prevent him from being the leader that most people look at. Now, on the other side of that, anytime you hear anyone say anything about him on the record from a teammate standpoint, it's always positive, whether it was Michael Pittman now and was it Darius Leonard and some other guys on the Colts. And anytime you hear anything negative and criticism, it's always anonymous. And, you know, that makes you wonder.
All right, last one, Rob. And I readily admit my sources are not McMullen sources or your sources. You guys are truly tied in. I have a couple little contacts. A source told me that it may very well have been Rob Maaddi who bid over $500,000 for Tom Brady's last football thrown as a touchdown in the National Football League. Oops, he's unretired. Oh, wow. How much that? 500,000 and change? Do you want to confirm or deny that you were involved in this, Maaddi?
I can confirm that I did not even bid the change part, the 18,000. It was 518, I believe. I wouldn't even bid the 518 for that football. But I will say this was pretty cool. Last night, Tom Brady's coming back. My kids are playing in the room. I mentioned before how like they just started liking football, my two little girls, and all because of Tom and the Bucs here. And they just were thrilled and excited. Oh, I can't believe. So seeing football through their eyes for the first time and their joy and their excitement was different for me. And it was a pretty cool experience.
We're glad that you didn't bid the 518 or the 18. We're glad to know the girls are getting into football. You can make them Eagle fans, Maaddi. There's going to be some parenting involved.
That's going to be tough with Tom Brady. That's going to be tough.
I'll tell you where I'm headed to right now, guys. They thought they could get rid of me. I'm on my way to Clearwater. There's some Phillies baseball going on. Yeah. I know I'm an NFL writer now, but hey, you know, baseball is my first love. I'm about to go catch me some Phillies action.
I've done Clearwater with Rob Maaddi. It is a good time. RM, always a pleasure, buddy. Thanks for hopping on. We'll get you back on in a couple of weeks.
Thanks,
Anytime,
Rob.
boys. Thank you.
Rob Maaddi here with us, Associated Press lead NFL writer here with us on Birds 365. All right, ran late with Rob. Oh, shoot, we're just about this much time left to put a bow on the show. Come back.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Mac guys, coming back to the show here on this Monday edition of Birds 365. All right, this was going to be my first question to start the show. Then whatever happened, we got off on a tangent, so I never asked you. So I'll ask you here at the end of the show, McMullen, which is even better because it leads into tomorrow's show, which is coming down in just under 22 hours from now. When we resume Birds 365 tomorrow, will the Eagles have signed a player? Will there be a free agent agreement? No, it can't officially go to paper till Wednesday, but will there be an announcement that the Eagles have come to terms with a player? And if so, what position is that player going to be at?
I'm going to go 60-40 yes. I think they're going to target somebody and get them done quickly. I think it's safety, edge rusher, lesser wide receiver. But one of those three positions, I think the biggest splash, Rob is right, Chandler Jones. If they're going to make a big splash, it's going to be Chandler Jones. Then Justin Reed type. Juju Smith-Schuster, I don't think they're going to be able to get. So if they want to go a little bit higher, Allen Robinson, but that's probably a long shot. So I'm going to say they're going to announce something by Wednesday. You're going to know something. I don't know about
Wednesday.
Tomorrow.
Well, you got to get through Tuesday before you get to Wednesday, John. I asked about Tuesday.
I'm not as confident tomorrow, but I'll say yes. Why not?
Okay.
What does it matter?
All right. If the Eagles want to wow me, it's one of two players. It's Marcus Williams or it's Hassan Reddick. If you believe that they are more defensive line inertia, that's what Rob Maaddi said. He's got right to do so. The Eagles have always, under Howie Roseman, been a trenches kind of team. If you tell me that safety is not pass rush pressure.
Hassan Reddick would wow you more than Chandler Jones?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Chandler Jones, 32.
Yeah, but he's
Hassan
good.
Reddick's 27. I want some youth, John. They've already got, unless they're going to clear out Fletcher Cox and go with an all young defensive line. I want some youth on that defensive line.
I'd always rather you too. You'd prefer a guy, as I always say, coming off that first contract. But Chandler Jones is, I'm not going to say he's Khalil Mack, but he's right underneath. You're talking about a guy who's had 16, 17, I think he had 19 one year sacks in a season. He had 28 tackles for losses.
You told me at the top of the show we got off on a Marcus Williams tangent. You think that might be a little too expensive a neighborhood for the Eagles?
Yeah, he's very expensive. Very expensive.
Who do you think's going to get paid more, Chandler Jones or Marcus Williams?
Chandler Jones.
Yeah, that's why I'd rather have
But
Marcus
that's
Williams
about the position. I was just talking about the splash nature. I was surprised that you would consider Hassan Reddick more of a splash.
Yeah, maybe it's because I don't think they're going to be a player in the Chandler Jones market. Because it's
either do I. I just heard some weird, and Rob brought it up again. There's been more talk than expected about Chandler Jones, which surprised me, to be honest.
Yeah, I think for a lesser price, I'd take the chance. And I love the point that Rob made because we don't hit on it enough. Jonathan Gannon did sit there. The first time you guys got a chance to talk to him last year, and he said, I'm not a round peg and a square hole guy. I'm going to fit my defense to the play. We don't have a scheme. And then, of course, he had a scheme. And, yes, he had tenants that he believed in and didn't move off and wasn't uber aggressive of. Yeah, Gannon's got to show me a little something this year. Make Hassan Reddick fit your defense. That would really impress me, Jonathan Gannon. All right, we'll see if Hassan Reddick or Marcus Williams or anybody else, Chandler Jones, is an Eagle by the time we get back tomorrow.
Justin Reed.
Well, he's pushing that Justin Reed thing. Justin Reed is like the fourth, fifth best safety. I don't want I want better than Justin Reed, Johnny.
Splash.
We'll
Justin
see
Reed.
if we get a splash tomorrow. We're back here on Birds 365 and 2 and 2.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and